Good afternoon, everyone. What an amazing performance. Thank you. And a round of applause to Beatriz, Mariana, Maya, and Gonçalo, please. We hope this will be a pleasant activity to you all. And here with me is Matilde, Manel, and Zé Pedro.
And of course, Matilde.
Before we start, we would just like to say thank you to our teacher, Isabel Tomé, for helping us create this event and for trusting in our minds to lead it by our side. Without the principal and the administration, none of this could happen either. So we are really grateful for believing in us and giving the opportunity to all of the students to engage in the ESP Talks and make all of this happen. Teacher Amadeo, it's not to forget your help either. Thank you. And from the bottom of our hearts, we are really happy and thankful for everything the director, the administration, teacher Isabel and Amadeo, and all of the students here today did for this purpose.
A simple thought I had some months ago has created what we call now ESP Talks. I promise to be brief, but telling you how this project was born, it's important. We all want to be prepared for the job market when we finish our studies. We know that companies are requiring soft and hard skills from us. English language is not included in those skills anymore. Somehow, looking at your CV, employers will ask you to be proficient. But how can we feel prepared for this? Getting great grades in English subject, or investing in some extra classes? Maybe traveling and being out of our comfort zone where nobody speaks Portuguese. It's important to learn the grammar, present perfect and irregular verbs. But how can we be comfortable using these to communicate with others? Maybe practicing in group. We need to develop a solid connection between our ideas. Some time ago, I realized that there was a need among my colleagues, including me. We need to improve our English skills, and that's why we are here today. Although knowing that achieving a native speaker level is very difficult, we expect that this project gives wings to your creativity, puts us on the right track to be like a good English communicator someday, and inspire along with being inspired. Let me summarize. I had an idea. I talked to a teacher. She showed me the right and perfect team. And well, here we are. I am looking forward to hear you all. The teams are amazing, and I hope you all to enjoy.
Good afternoon, everyone. After understanding how the ESP Talks concept comes up, you should know why our first theme is, in fact, the human rights. On this day, 71 years ago, the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights was signed. Human rights are the rights you have simply because you were born human. Whether you're a garbage man, whether you're black, whether you're a child, an old person, a gardener, ill, or the CEO of a company. After the United Nations signed this declaration, we all supposed we would live happily ever after. But did we? Are we? If humans have freedom of speech, why are thousands imprisoned for speaking their minds? If humans have the right to education, why are there over 1 billion adults that can't read? If people have the right to food and shelter, why are there 16,000 children dying of starvation every single day? If slavery has truly been abolished, why are there 27 million people enslaved today? And in spite of every convention, every assembly, and every treaty made, this declaration can be just a little more than words on a page, as it had no force of the law. The question is, who will make those words a reality? When Nelson Mandela stood up for social justice in the 90s, his country had already agreed to abolish that discrimination, almost 4 decades before. Yet still, he fought, he marched. Those who fight for human rights today are not heroes, they're people. Children, parents, women, free-thinking individuals who refuse to be silent, who realize that universal rights are much more than words on a page. They're the choices we make every day to respect each other and to belong in a safe world. As Eleanor Roosevelt once said, where, after all, the universal human rights begin? In small places close to home, she said. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seek equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity, without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. So think, become an activist, volunteer, speak up, use your voice, and do what you think is worthy. Thank you.
The lovely contestants of the ESP Talks have chosen quite pertinent topics related to human rights. So, our program is freedom of speech, which are downright the buzzwords in countries like China, for example. Next up is a concern with education, which has been a rather silenced question, if you ask us, followed by the relation between duties and rights, and you will like this one as well. Also, it is always important to mention the concept of bullying and understand its effects. Afterwards, we have gender inequality, which I don't really think in the 21st century we need to mention how important that is for a large amount of communities around the world. Associated with the previous topic, we have trans rights, followed up by the worldwide problem of refugees. The ensuing topic is domestic violence, a widely debated conundrum here in Portugal, for example, and finishing it off with a grain of cheerfulness, we have leisures.
So, hi, my name is Raquel and this is Daniela, and we'll be discussing the importance and the meaning of freedom of speech.
According to Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes the freedom to all opinions without interference and to seek, receive and impart ideas and information through any media, regardless of frontiers. For those of you who don't know what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is, it's a document which contains the freedoms and rights everyone is entitled to. There are 30 articles in it, and we're going to talk about Article 19, freedom of speech. Firstly, we need to understand that there are different kinds of speeches, and not all of them are protected. When we talk about protected speech, we can talk about symbolic speech, such as flag burning. We can also talk about criticism of government officials and protests. But when we talk about obscene phrases and gestures, lies, speech deemed dangerous, or speech in school, it isn't protected by this article.
So, the definition of free speech was firstly introduced indirectly by ancient Greece, where its philosophers, leaders, and everyday Athenians were able to openly discuss politics, religion, and even to criticize the government in some settings. So, as Martin Luther King once said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And this is very true, because imagine that in 1904, the International Women's Suffrage Alliance wasn't created, and that women weren't able to stood up for voting, or even that Martin Luther King himself wouldn't be able to defend racial equality and to say that everyone we are all the same, no matter our race, and to give more actual example, Greta Thunberg. Imagine that she wouldn't be allowed to strike for the environment and to spread the awareness she is currently spreading. Imagine that none of these people were able to speak up their minds and give us and talk about these matters. Our society wouldn't develop at all.
Here I have a map in which each color represents if the country has free, partly free, or not free speech. The color blue represents countries which don't have freedom of expression. Most of them are located in Asia and Africa. Today we're going to focus on two. One that doesn't have freedom of speech and other that doesn't. Firstly, we have North Korea, where the system used is authoritarian communist state, and where all domestic radios, television and newspapers are controlled by the government. In this country, as well as in China, criticism of the government and its leaders is considered an offense and can be, making such statements can be cause for arrest or consignment of a re-education camp.
So, it might be odd that we put Portugal here, since we all grew up alongside the right of freely speaking up our minds, but it wasn't always like this. Many years ago, many people, since the 15th century to the Carnation Revolution in 1974, had to fight against the censorship that were those who dared to freely express thoughts that were contrary to official discourse were frequently punished with prison or public death.
Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. You probably heard this in many songs we listen to nowadays, as it's been used in many of them. Before, this was used as a childhood saying when referring to school bullying, meaning that words can cause any physical harm or pain, which is not true, because the unkind things we communicate can soil the best relationships with the deepest regrets. What lingers is a stain of hurt that may fade but never truly goes away. As Justin Versailles in A Walk with Brothers once said, the wounding words we say are like feathers in harsh wind. Once said, we'll never get them back, meaning that words can be power, and freedom of speech needs to exist, but needs to be used carefully.
A study was made where the main suicide cause was stated to be mental illness, mental disorder. Depression, which is considered a mental disorder, is estimated to affect over 264 million people worldwide, which is a lot. And what can lead to depression is personal conflicts with family members or friends, where some words may be used without a second thought and may hurt the people we are arguing with. This study unpleasantly shows that the words have a bigger impact than the one we actually give them. So to add some information to our presentation, we will be showing you a video that shows a different point of view than ours.
Why should we care about free speech? On college campuses, students clamor for restrictions on speech that they consider offensive, hateful, or disturbing. Internationally, countries consider further limiting speech in the wake of violence like that committed by those who object to portrayals of the Prophet Muhammad. In the American media, many commentators question whether such offensive and provocative speech should even be allowed. And why should it? What good does it do to let people offend others' deeply held religious beliefs? What good does it do to allow people to say racist or bigoted things? What about homophobic slurs, or remarks demeaning towards women, or any other nasty, hateful comments that you can imagine? Wouldn't our country be a better place if we shut down that kind of speech? No. Freedom of expression matters precisely because it allows us to voice and hear unpopular and controversial views. You don't have to like offensive speech. In fact, you should feel free to vigorously denounce and criticize speech that you see as wrong. But when people resort to force to prevent or restrict expressions that they disagree with, they undermine the very principles of freedom and tolerance that they claim to defend. When we allow the open expression of hateful opinions, we create opportunities to publicly refute them. The U.S. Supreme Court has upheld the right of neo-Nazis to march through Jewish neighborhoods while expressing acutely offensive and distressing views. But when such ugly demonstrations have taken place, much larger counter-demonstrations have arisen in opposition. The result? Greater awareness about the importance of taking a stand against hate. Allowing offensive speech also matters because it promotes the progress of human understanding. Some expressions, once widely denounced as offensive or even dangerous, have won vindication and become received truth. Whether it was scientists like Galileo challenging religious dogma about astronomy, abolitionists calling for the end of slavery, civil rights leaders demanding an end to Jim Crow laws, or gay magazine publishers whose work was labeled obscenity. Speech that authorities once tried to censor has instead contributed immeasurably to our culture. When authorities seize the power to silence offensive views, they also of necessity seize the power to silence dissenting and minority views. In effect, censors pursue a policy of ignorance by design. That's why smart societies respect freedom of expression, even when, especially when, it causes discomfort and offense.
Now, can you imagine not being able to speak your mind, or have a different opinion to other people and not being able to express it without facing drastic consequences? Probably not. Most of us were born in a time where speech was already free. That's why this human right is so underrated. People don't see its value, as they didn't have to fight for it, like people before us had to. Bearing all we've heard today bearing all in mind, freedom of expression is a fundamental human right. It reinforces all other human rights, allowing society to develop and progress. The ability to express your opinion and speak freely is essential to bring about change in society. So, don't be afraid to speak your mind and stand up for what you believe in. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela and Raquel. Now I'd like to call Patricia Ferreira and Filipa Meireles. They're going to talk about human rights and education.
As we all know, and according to the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights, everyone has the right to education. But what is education?
Einstein once said, "Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think."
This is, in our opinion, the best definition of what a good education is, or at least should be. I think we all agree that in today's world, it is completely useless for us to memorize facts, as we can have access to all the information we want in a matter of seconds.
Creativity is by far the most important skill for the future. We live in a world where everything is becoming automatic, so it is pointless for us, humans, to be just like another machine. We'll never be as efficient as one. Instead, we should embrace our unique ability to create and to think outside of the box, because after all, no one has ever changed the world by being just like it.
In our modern society, most children and teenagers take school for granted and even complain about having to wake up every morning to go to school. We won't deny it. We are also part of those teens, and probably so are you. But have you ever thought about the 262 million of children that still don't have access to education? For you to have an idea of how huge this number is, I'm going to make a comparison. So, this number is the same as 131 times the total number of children living in Portugal. Or, in other words, 1 out of 5 children is still out of school.
It is not right for these children to be treated like that. It is not right that they have to work all day, every day, most of the time without even earning a single cent. This is a modern kind of slavery which goes against another human right. We cannot forget that the children of today are the society of tomorrow. Therefore, they must be treated with all the care and the respect that they deserve. They must be able to play, to develop their creative minds, and to live their childhood in a dignified way.
Somalia has one of the highest educational ranges of always. Only 10% of its children are going to school. This has happened because of 2 decades of conflict, which has resulted in a poor country that makes it very difficult for parents to afford school expenses.
This problem is even more concerning within girls, as their participation in education is consistently lower than boys.
But not everything is negative. Efforts are being made worldwide, and the rate of children illiterated is slowly declining.
If this is happening, it's because of people like Malala. Do you know who she is? Malala is a Pakistani 17-year-old girl who speaks out publicly against the prohibition on the education of girls. In 2012, she was shot, but she didn't give up. She survived and became the youngest person to win the Nobel Peace Prize.
We are now going to show you a short video of the famous speech she gave when she turned 16.
That our sisters and brothers are waiting for a bright, peaceful future. So let us wage a global struggle against illiteracy, poverty, and terrorism. Let us pick up our books and our pens. They are our most powerful weapons. One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world. Education is the only solution. Education first.
But education is not a simple human right. It actually involves all the others. In a good educational system, all students must have freedom of speech and thought, must all be treated the same way, and must all have the right to rest and play.
Wouldn't you be surprised if I told you that even in developed countries like South Korea, human rights aren't always accomplished when it comes to education? Korean students are required to go to school from Monday to Saturday for 15 hours a day, which means that they don't have enough time for hobbies or even for sleeping. This is very alarming, considering the importance of sleep, especially for the youngsters.
As a result, Korea has one of the highest suicide rates in the world. More than 50% of its students agree that this is happening because of the enormous pressure created around their academic performance.
Their grades totally define whether or not they are going to have a prosperous future. The competition is actually so fierce that in 2008, the government ruled that it was completely forbidden for students to stay awake studying after 10 p.m. and even created a special police to control them.
Something even more shocking is that in Korea, corporal punishment is still a reality.
But there are several good education systems around the world. A great example is found in Finland. Finnish children do not go to school until the age of 7, which means that they have enough time to enjoy their childhood. It may surprise you, but you will not find a single children in Finland who will cry because of having to go to school.
There are no standardized tests, no pressure or any competition among students. All students are treated the same way, and there is no differentiation between those who are good at studying and those who are not.
Children never spend more than 4 hours in school a day, which means they have plenty of time to sleep and to rest.
And even though Finnish educational system is so focused on life skills, Finnish students are still among the best in the world. These results have shown that they are better than the average in reading, mathematics and science.
But what about our country? Well, we think that in Portugal, the education is much better compared to other countries, so we as students should be really grateful for that. But it is not perfect at all. There's still a long way to go and a lot of things to change.
In our opinion, the timetables are insanely extended. We think that the standardized tests that are still applied are not the best way of evaluating our students, and all the pressure that is put in children from a young age does nothing more than increase the chance of them developing mental health problems in the future.
It should be our number one priority to make sure that every child in the world is able to go to school and to learn everything they need to know to succeed in life. There's nothing more powerful in the world than a good education inspired by the human rights.
As Aristotle said, educating the mind without educating the soul is no education at all. Thank you.